All right, everyone, we have Coach Zach Rockford from Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, joining us. He is a stud, a good friend of mine. Really happy to be able to continue to have this relationship with him, having sent one of our former intern coaches, Bobby Teal, down there to be a graduate assistant for them. So really happy to have him on. They run a stellar internship program and develop some really high functioning coaches. So we're looking forward to speaking with him and finding out a little bit more about what they've got going on. So Coach Zach Rockford, if you could please go ahead and introduce yourself a bit more broadly, maybe touch on some of your developmental opportunities that you've had growing up as a younger coach, and maybe point to a couple of those decisions along the way that led you to exactly where you are right now.
Absolutely. First and foremost, thank you. In getting into it, grew up in Central Illinois, had the opportunity to go into PT in college, and then figured out strength and conditioning was a thing. So when I had the opportunity to intern down at TCU in 2014, took advantage of that. I went down there. Zach Decant was our internship coordinator. He was very big in my development early on, especially. Spent time there, and then I went down to San Antonio at UIW, or University of the Incarnate Word, where Darren Lavatt oversaw my development as a GA for 2 years. In that summer, after I finished there at UIW, I interned at UTSA, kept my foot in the door, so to speak, as I was looking for more of a full-time role. Just couldn't get anything to go to my way, but I was pretty determined to stay in it. And so I had a couple opportunities from there to do internships. And I went out to University of Arizona, where I went through a dual role. I was able to work with football and the Olympic staff. So Chris Allen was the mentor, as well as Jim Crumpos. So one was on football, Chris, and the other one was on the Olympic. I worked with football, baseball, and then everywhere in between, basically getting as much as I could from an exposure and involvement standpoint, just to learn, at that point in time, building that network and those connections, for someone to put their name on you as, hey, I would hire this person. This is a good coach. It takes some rapport building, but also it takes some, hard work on your end, to show that you're willing to be consistent with showing up and doing the little things day in and day out to be successful. There's a lot of hours in this job. In order to, narrow down the amount of time you have to spend inside, the workplace, I think you have to be very diligent in your process of getting there first. So that was pretty big. At every stint, I had the opportunity to work with return to play athletes. At TCU on the football side, I was the guy that ran all the return to play guys. Now, with that being said, it would be, hey, these guys are going to do the Olympic, the cleans or whatever Olympic variation that was. Can you go run the med ball variations? And I had the ability to tell coach, hey, can we do it this way? And they signed off on it. So that was pretty cool. At UIW, it was very similar with the football guys, where I had the ability to, have a hand in their return to play as well. And then at U of A, it was the exact same thing with the football guys for return to play. It was just modifications though, how can we continue to train and, still be a part of the team setting, which is a pretty big piece to our return to play process here at SIUE.
Yeah, fantastic. It's really good to hear in your development, especially, but I'm hearing this more and more is young coaches, just like you said, those that show that they are passionate, they show that they have at least a baseline level of knowledge. They begin to make themselves invaluable. And clearly that's the mindset that you took. You were determined to stay in the profession, even with things not necessarily going your way. And it's also refreshing to hear with those responsibilities that you were given, you develop a ton of understanding around the process of training. Maybe you're not delivering the training to the larger group, or you're making necessarily those larger training decisions in terms of the broader picture of the programming. But just like you said, with the return to play, you're constantly thinking about progression, regression, lateralization of all these different movements. So it's really, really nice to hear that. And now, in the position you're in right now as the internship coordinator, the tables have kind of turned, because now you're that person who's looking at these applications coming in. These new coaches come through your door on day one. You're trying to figure out exactly who they are, where they're at in terms of their coach development process, and trying to kind of meet them in that space so that you can hopefully do the same as what the various coaches did to you along the way. So specifically about SIUE, in terms of intern coaches who come and work alongside you and work with your student athletes, what are the typical daily and weekly responsibilities that they might have? And what does that week setup look like in general for them?
Yeah, so with our internship being about 14 weeks, in the spring and the fall, and then the summer being 10 weeks, it does change a little bit. The summer hours might be a little more compacted, just because we don't have athletes coming in super early. We don't have athletes coming in super late. And then in the spring and the fall, it's a little different as well. Our hours are a little bit more open because we have school that the athletes have to go to and things like that. So we're working on class schedules and things like that. So a typical Monday through Friday in the spring and the fall is going to be somewhere between 6:37 till about 5 p.m. at night. And in that time period, we're working through day one, what's opening procedures and what's closing procedures. So that way we can turn the lights on and we can turn the lights off. That's step one. If we can't open the facility well, we can't invite anyone in. And then within that, we're going over things like, what do we have to do in the background to be successful? What can we do from an internship standpoint that help the full-time staff continue to do their jobs at a high level? Because at the end of the day, if you can take stress off of the full-time coaches from whether it's, day-to-day cleaning or day-to-day laundry, day-to-day just simple organization standpoint, that takes a lot for us to then give back to the interns in terms of mental capacity to talk through, programming, development, and have more in-depth conversations to have more context rather than worrying about the 5-pound weights that are out. It allows us to give more to them as long as we can do all the little things correct. That's pretty much the operational side. Now, from a day-to-day standpoint, starting and ending the day, really the training sessions, right? So typically we start out with, hey, let's learn the warm-ups and the cool downs as they're going kind of through their coach teach progressions with staff only. And then that will progress to, assisting and eventually running, sessions. And I just provide feedback, to them like, hey, I thought your break or your setup with the team, your initial speech with the team and breakdown the day was really good. I thought our closing part of the day with the team, you kind of know what you wanted to say. So you kind of rambled on, you kept going. And I think that's a good opportunity for them to do it and then get feedback provided to them. Because the first time they get that opportunity shouldn't be when they're in a paid role, right? They should already know those ropes and what they want to say. And a simple thing to do, and I did this early on, was, hey, write out the small things you want to touch on, and then before the session, and then regurgitate to yourself and just ask yourself, does that sound good? And if it doesn't, then don't say it, Or what's the simplest thing you can say to get the session started, If it's a couple tagline words that you want them to focus on, or a couple big parts of the exercise or the day that you want them to focus on, like make sure you highlight those, right? Instead of this monotone, way of talking, let's have ebbs and flows in voice and pitch so they understand what is important rather than the 60 minutes is important. That's not how it all works, right? There is some like slow down period of time, like in the recovery session or in the recovery period, maybe it was like on a back squat, right? If they're always jacked, ready to go, they're probably not going to be focused on the big details that matter because everything they're being so focused on, right? So small things like that we work towards. And then from a standpoint of actual intern time slots, we'll do typically like a morning session where it's like you're the opening group until like midday. So somewhere like between like 11 and 12, they'll transition out. And then 12 to 5 p.m. Will be like another part of the internship group. And then there's also interns that have the ability to give full days and things like that. We're pretty flexible in terms of our time slot because we know, this field doesn't pay a lot, especially starting out. So you got to have a job, you got to make ends meet on your end. And if we can help them on the stuff outside, just like our athletes, they're more focused when they're inside. And then they're getting more out of the internship and things like that. And those times are becoming more effective. You're not just spinning your wheels and sitting there and watching everything, you're engaging and you're involved.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, 100%. I mean, they just as with the student athletes, with you helping them in developing not just as an athlete, but as a person and as a professional in whatever career they want to move into. It's the same with your intern coaches, and that as soon as they know that you care about them and that you're, again, trying to meet them where they're at because they need a part-time job to make ends meet, then of course they're going to be more likely to trust the recommendations you have for them. They'll be more likely to accept some pretty heavy critical feedback if you have it for them. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. I really like the model, actually. I haven't heard of it yet, of having almost like a morning intern group and then the afternoon intern group as well. I think if you have, you have that concerted period of the day where you know who's going to be there specifically, and that group gets to know each other, and it's a short enough period of time that they have like true attention and focus to detail in that time, rather than being in for a little bit, going away for a chunk of a period of time, and then coming back again, and later in the day, they may not be quite as focused. So it's an interesting setup. I like that quite a lot, actually.
And then we'll actually get the ability to do internship devo, that cross-section area. And then the interns can kind of pick and choose a little bit. Hey, I really want to work with this team because I want to be around this dynamic. It allows them to have a kind of say in their development, which I think is a big piece of our success, right? If you only want to work with men's and women's basketball, perfect. Like Colton Susan, who is here right now, is a big piece of that. Like, I want you to shadow him as often as possible. Well, this is when they train. All right. Can you make it available with your schedule? And then can you still be a part of the internship development? I think it's a big piece. Them having a say in their development is big for what they're actually caring about. Too often, I think we just assume that everyone's got to go through the exact same thing that we did. And the times are changing, just like the technology, just like the information, right? Like we have to be up with it as well. And part of that is the motivation to be here. I want to do what I want to do. All right. Well, we provide this. Can you make it? Yes or no? And if you can't, okay.
Right. Yeah. I think John Waggle was speaking with me about this last year, and he actually talked about this during the seminar this summer. And it was like, you have to develop breadth across the whole, the kind of professional career in general. But then you also, ideally, if you want to be hireable in terms of elevating your position, you have to have some kind of content level expertise in more of a specific area. But then he also touched on the fact that too many of us, like nowadays, because there's so much information out there, too many of us chase knowledge in all areas and at multiple levels of depth all at the same time, rather than just realizing, I'm not a math guy or an analytics guy. I don't enjoy learning about it. I understand it's important, but it's not for me. I'm not going to, spend my time, energy, and effort on diving into that too much. However, I am really interested in speed development. And so I'm going to become much more involved. So if you focus on your passions, you're definitely going to have more progress than just really trying to make a tiny bit of progress in a million different directions all the time.
Yeah. It's almost like burning the candle at both ends, right?
Yeah.
Or, a generalist in all, but a master in none. Exactly. But if you can slowly become a master in each little bit, or someone on staff, like we did this year, is we try to divvy up certain segments, whether it's speed development, technology use, data science, energy system development. Maybe it's movement science, in terms of like better screening protocols, things like that, things that have better clues in the information they get from it. And then each one on staff kind of dives into that little segment, and then they present that information to everyone on staff. And then we all can kind of roundtable that, rather than us, going through our Twitter feed or our Instagram feed and, diving into 4 different topics at once and really not getting anything out of it besides surface level information, which, as we know, surface level doesn't involve critical thinking, which doesn't really make change. So you're kind of just staying in the same place, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious to see how that's going to kind of transition out. I'm excited for it, as we kind of come into it. So that's how we've actually changed our professional development a little bit for our staff as well.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. And you touched on it a little bit already in terms of exposing younger coaches to the nuances that are kind of on the fringes of a training session, like how to begin a training session. What are you going to say? How are you going to carry yourself? What kind of tone do you need to set? And I think that's a big part of obviously what they do not learn from a textbook in their kines class or movement science class or whatever. So in terms of the professional development curriculum of your young coaches at SIUE, it's clear from the webpage you have a really extensive and well thought out curriculum. So I wonder if you could dive into a little bit of what you do at SIUE for developing those young coaches in those specific staff and intern development sessions, and maybe touch on one or two unique attributes of that program that you think you guys do particularly well.
Absolutely. So we say this, it's a penciled outline with, a pin decision based off where our interns are at. And there's 3 phases to really the internship curriculum. And I would like to think they kind of go on top of each other, from a layering standpoint. And the first one's on-floor coaching. So for the most part, it's getting down, the warm up, the cool down, with the sessions. Like that's what you can be involved in as soon as possible. The assignment within that time period for the interns to work on is their progressions, regressions, and lateralizations. So how would you go about progressing the squat pattern day one, right? Let's talk through those things. What are your coaching cues, things like that. The next step to that would be the coach teach session, where there's 3 fundamental pieces to it. I actually got this from Ryan DeVrent at University of Kentucky when, just talking shop, I went and visited and I really liked it. And I thought it had a lot of value in it. And what it is basically, hey, you're going to teach me how to do it. And this is probably the safest time because I know kind of what you should be saying and things like that. And then I can provide feedback for you. And then there's levels to it. So like the first one is one-on-one, right? One athlete, one coach. So return to play setting, one athlete, take them through the whole session. The second phase is, okay, you have 3 to 4 athletes and it's 1 to 2 exercises. And then the third phase is with music. So can you project and things like that? And I really like the layout of that as we go through. Now, this isn't like a fast-paced thing. The interns will finish at the pace in which, they're ready for. Some of them need a little bit more coaching. Some of them have never been in a weight room. They've been behind the textbook. And so, we're trying to allow them to apply that information. So while they're doing the warm-ups and cool downs in our system, things they don't have to worry about the critical thinking side of, it's already placed out for them. They just got to run them and be a part of them. They then critically think through their progressions, regressions, and then actively coach when we have internship development in that period of time. During that time, we're doing our philosophy and all that stuff, kind of the why here at SIUE, why we do the things we do. So that way they get why we do what we do here and how to go about doing it. So they learn our system, so to speak. The next phase that they get into, if they're proficient and continue to coach, would be the programming education side. At this point in time, hopefully they're transitioned to like being more part of the team session, whether it's running the speed development side of that session or the energy system energy system development session for the day. Maybe it's just having more of a voice in that part of the workout. You take the A series, I'll take the B series, rather than you only have one exercise today. So they're gaining more responsibility as well. On the back end of that, we're going to start going into programming education. So looking at block periodization, Ultimate MMA, the 2 books they'd be reading already, and then applying that information in whiteboard sessions, right? The staff will present on a weekly basis as well, certain topics in there. So a big thing for us within that is force is king. We talk about that. That kind of helps lay out the foundational quality or the kind of the premise to why we do what we do in each block of training. From there, we'll look at, RSI, PAP, isoinertial training, VBT, because that's important in a different block of training and why it's important that we touch on these qualities, things like that. Speed development, change of direction, same thing. Like we're going to give these presentations to them for them to absorb as much information from an educational side while also seeing it applied in the team setting. So you're seeing it from different layers. So hopefully like it starts to stick a little bit, right? Once we get through like the outlines of accumulation, intensification, transmutation, realization, we then will whiteboard, scenarios for the interns, right? They have their sports they're going to end up doing their programming for. So they're doing a needs analysis and they start to think, hey, how does this fit to my sport, right? They're doing all the groundwork to then build the program out. And then once we kind of get through that, we work on the professional development side. And so really what that looks at is resume, cover letter, mock interviews. Maybe there's a position here at SIUE that we feel an intern would fill very well for us in terms of maybe it's that part-time, paid where we can cover, some things from a continuing education standpoint or certification standpoint while they're still, getting their master's degree because they're already in the master's program. maybe it is a GA position here, and we really like this intern, and they fit the needs of that position. So we want to get them ready for it. And then also at that point in time, that's when, they'll potentially get mock interviews from other universities. We have a unique relationship with a decent amount of people that, hey, I have 5 interns. Can you do mock interviews with them and for a position at your school, and then provide feedback for them, which is a nice thing from a standpoint of being networked or well networked in the field. That's kind of the 3 phases of the development process that we go through. Unique experiences, honestly, hands-on, a lot of tech exposure. We're very fortunate to have done case studies for multiple, tech companies, VX Sport being one of them. Vald, we've done case study for as well. We've hosted some seminars, the Eccentrics, the first Eccentrics seminar in the US we hosted here at SIUE. Let's React was another company that we had most recently started working with. All top-notch companies, right? That we utilize their technology and we find very high value in. So we want to make sure they get to see that stuff firsthand as well. There's an intern swap. Obviously, with 2020, it makes it a little more difficult to go places and things like that. So we've kind of transitioned to a virtual one. There's some more stuff coming down the pipeline with that as well, so stay tuned there. Guest speakers and professional roundtables we try to do often. If it might just be a topic, 2 or 3 times a semester, nothing, big, but just allow people to present to our staff. It's pretty awesome. I learn as well. And then one of the cool, interesting pieces I like is our staff is made of 5 people, 3 full-times and 2 GAs. And anywhere between, 4 to 5 interns. Those interns get to see the unique relationship we have as a staff. There's 3 full-times all in the same office. We have frequent conversations. We have frequent, what we call audits, or debates, where I'm just asking, hey, is this the best way? It's not necessarily questioning them. It's challenging my staff members to continue to grow critically as well. And I think this is probably the biggest piece to it. Why I love SIUE is we're all trying to get better. And we're trying to make SIUE better tomorrow than it was today. And the only way we can do that is if we continue to push each other. Sometimes that comes at an ego shot every once in a while. But if you can look in the mirror knowing every single day you're doing what you can to help yourself push your staff, I think everyone around will, get on top and continue to go for that.
Yeah, very, very unique, very holistic. So many pieces of gold in there to touch on. I think one of the best things there was like that, the tiered exposure you have when you're talking about, okay, you're going to start coaching one-on-one first, then it's going to be in a small group setting, then in a larger group, then larger group with distractions. It's almost following, that movement literacy model in terms of going from simple to complex, emulating that kind of style. But it's nice because you allow those younger coaches who may be a little bit underconfident in what they want to say in terms of coaching cues, or just underconfident in projecting their voice, just like you said. So they're able to kind of aggregate those small wins over time to become more and more confident in their coaching, which is really, really good. And then the staff audits, something I've seen more and more staff do. I really like the concept of that. It's not something that we've done here at Marquette yet, to be honest. But one thing we did do a number of years ago was every staff member and every intern coach would submit at the end of the week 3 things I learned this week. And so we'd have this continuous kind of conversation about, what are the full-time staff members, our director having had, 15 plus years, 20 years almost in the field. Obviously, he's going to be learning things that are vastly different to us who are just 6 or 7 years in versus the intern coaches who are maybe it's their first semester. So it's always interesting to share those different thoughts and allow, thoughts to circulate and conversations to take direction, which is really nice. Excellent. Good. So clearly you've had a number of different intern coaches who've gone on, they've moved on from SIUE, spread across the country. And so I wonder if you could touch on perhaps 1, maybe 2 individuals that you have that have moved on from SIUE, what they were like when they were with you, and potentially why you think their personal and professional characteristics led them to the position that they're at right now.
Absolutely. like you said, this was a hard one. We've had a lot of successful strength and conditioning coaches go, whether it's collegiate, private, or open their own business. One stands out in particular, kind of emulates what we talked about from the curriculum side, and that was Alex Roberts. Alex started out with his first semester, kind of was interested in being here, didn't really know why. He wanted to get into, just like everyone else, wanted to be around sports, right? Like the weight room, things like that. Intern with us, soaked up decent amount of knowledge, intern somewhere else, and then wanted to intern again. So what ultimately ended up happening is, he goes to the internship the first time. He challenged himself a little bit from a programming standpoint. He's one of the top guys that when we did energy system development, he based his whole program around the 3 energy systems, just from the training side of things. Like, hey, today is a complete alactic day from the standpoint of like what we're trying to do. Hey, this day is all of what we would call like an aerobic style day. And a lot of it's geared from Joel Jameson, which honestly, like when you take out like exercises and start looking at more of an ESD approach, that's a challenging thing to do, right? That challenges the status quo. He took a lot of ownership for the mistakes he made, as an intern. He took a lot of feedback, and then he applied it. And that kind of came back in the second, internship with us in the second semester, where he basically ran my baseball sessions for our preseason, and I was almost his assistant. As we have, that tiering approach as we come in season where your pitchers and your position guys start to like transition into more of their different styles of training based off the individual needs that they have. So that allowed us to attack a team of 32 with basically 2 head coaches, right? 2 head strength coaches. And we would talk after the session and, we would go about, hey, what could improve? What wasn't good? What was great? And made modifications from there. And then on top of that, he would take another intern because he had already been there a semester, and he would be like their lead intern. And he would coach them just like another full-time one. So it was really cool to see him like transition through that like very early stage of like, hey, I kind of like this, but I don't understand my full impact yet, to I understand now what it is. And then we were talking on the technology side. Alex actually broke one of our K boxes. So he had to figure out how to fix it. Not the, most expensive piece of equipment, not the cheapest by any means. And so he was in contact with Eccentrics and trying to get it fixed, finally got it fixed. Well, Alex ended up getting a job with Eccentrics when he finished here at SIUE. So he went on to the equipment side. Transition a year and a half later, Alex now works at a high school out in Indiana, where he's kind of made it full circle, right? He's worked in the college setting, didn't really understand what his impact was, knew he wanted to coach, took the tech job or the equipment job for the time being, and then came back full circle and said, you know what, my impact I think will be greatest at the high school level to prepare these kids for what the college level will ultimately be. Right there, I mean, you have someone that has come full circle from a personal and professional level that I couldn't be more proud of, from the standpoint of that. And that's not to say any of our other interns I'm not proud of either, but it is pretty amazing to see kind of that transition. And Alex wasn't an athlete with us. We actually have a lot of athletes that intern with us when they're done because they want to get into it. Most of those guys have already been in the weight room, or girls have been in the weight room for 3-4 plus years at our level, and they already know what the expectation is. You know what I mean? So for him to come in and figure that out along the way was pretty cool.
Yeah, awesome. One thing you said there kind of rang a bell in my head of a phrase that is commonly said and heard, and that is like acting changes everything. In terms of, I say to our intern coaches quite often, the sooner you start acting like you're a part of this staff, or the sooner you start acting like a head strength conditioning coach, if you've been interning or developing in the profession for a little while now, the sooner that's going to happen for you, because you start to think in kind of different ways rather than being, oh, I'm just a volunteer intern, I don't really know much right now, so I'm just going to stand in the shadows. But the sooner you act and you step out and you just cross that line every single day into that slight bit of discomfort of being a little bit vulnerable to making a mistake, then the sooner you're going to develop. much quicker. So yeah, no, that's really, really cool. And another thing you said was that Alex kind of found out what his impact was. And I like that phrase. I like the way that us as coaches who've developed in the field, and we've had mentors that have helped us find our impact. Now we have the opportunity to also help these younger coaches exactly find what their impact is. And just as you mentioned 20 minutes ago or something, somebody's impact might be in basketball strength conditioning, and that's it. And even though strength conditioning can be applied, obviously, across many different sectors and different sports, maybe it's just not for them, you know, to do that with a swim and dive program in a collegiate setting. Maybe the NBA and in a basketball setting is exactly where they need to be, and that's where their passion is. So yeah, finding their impact, really, really cool. Good. Okay, so then wrapping it up here, Coach Rockford, in terms of the personal and professional characteristics that you guys see in young coaches coming through, particularly those that are successful, and bearing in mind the staff that you have there and your full-timers and your GAs as well, what kind of personal and professional characteristics do you typically look out for when you see these applications come in, and how would that mesh with your staff?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing, whether it's characteristic or not, is interest in being here and doing what is necessary to be in the field. I'm all for, hey, let's dabble in this, you know, let's figure it out. But once you've decided, hey, I want to be in here, all right, I need you to change from being present to have a presence. I need you to actively engage with the student athletes, right? Communication is the biggest piece, right? Like we say this all the time, like just because the exercise isn't wrong, they're not doing something wrong, doesn't mean you can't engage with them. Check in, see how they feel. You know, like little things like that, you know, go a long way to help us continue to have a positive influence or positive impact on those that we have. You know, we have 60 minutes, so maybe less, maybe a little more, but that's per time in a day. So let's make that impactful. So someone that, you know, carries that same thought process and that wants to be like part of the staff, you know, they enjoy that piece. And then, you know, the 3 C's that we'll like to say is, you know, communication, confident, and someone that likes to be challenged are 3 big ones. And with that comes transparency. You know, if those 3 things are important to you, you'll be pretty transparent. And so will we on the feedback that we give you and the feedback you seek in order to improve. Those are the biggest ones. And then I always, you know, lead from the front with what I call my 3 E's, which is always going to be, I want to educate, I'm going to bring enthusiasm, and I'm going to empower you. It's funny that, you know, our school has an E as one of its emblems and symbols. But those have always been the 3 big things for me. And I think they embody, you know, what our staff is about. You know, I think everyone brings something a little different, which is great. But it's all pretty much the same thing. And I think we all seek to do the 3 C's, which is communicate, be confident, and be challenged as often as possible.
Awesome. Well, Coach, you're clearly hugely passionate about what you do. And I'm glad, you know, obviously with this new Connect platform, to be able to share with many young coaches these internships that are out there that potentially they may not have ever known about. They may have just been looking to schools in their specific area or schools with a larger name or a larger presence athletically, but potentially those aren't the best schools for them to find their development at. So couldn't be happier to spread the message about SIUE. I know you guys put on some excellent stuff there, and I certainly look forward to coming down in the future and seeing that firsthand myself.
Yeah, really appreciate it. You know, having me on and everything you're doing for the field. You know, it's a great thing, and I think it's only going to get better as, you know, we, you know, get a little further down the road.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much for your time, Coach. Obviously, anyone who's watching this video, whether it's specifically on SIUE's page or on YouTube, you can find all the information below about the details of the internship program. And then right down at the bottom of the page, they have all of the application materials that are required to submit to Coach Zach Rockford here and the deadlines for the different semesters coming up. But hopefully we'll be sending a couple of intern coaches your way. You'll be busier than ever, sorting through a stellar group of young coaches who are looking to develop into the profession. So Coach, couldn't thank you very much for your time, and we'll speak to you soon.